Thousand Autumns, is a Meng Xi Shi novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 103. Over there, Xiao Se and Li Qingyu's match had started. Both sides were very fast. The two were rendered into shadow. For those whose Wuzhong observation skills was not up to par, they could barely tell where the blows landed, how each move happened, how one person resolved the other's attack. Once they'd started, they couldn't be restrained to a circumscribed area. Soon, they went from the ground to the adjacent stone walls. Suspended above the stone walls, they fought for a while, then flew above the bamboo grove. Both had excellent qinggong in excess. One step off their feet was enough to propel them far off the ground. Xiao Se's fan edge and Li Qingyu's sword glint dazzled in their exchange, the sound resonating, shaking people's hearts, too much to take in at once. As Shen Qiao saw it, Li Qingyu was Zhenjiangwen's best disciple of his generation, and someone in pursuit of the world top 10 someday. Xiao Se was also very strong, but couldn't compare to Li Qingyu. To win would be no easy feat. By then Yuan Xiaoxia will have to step up for her disciple. Then when Yi Baikan truly steps in, how will Yuan Xiaoxia manage? If Hehuan sect was only depending on Yuan Xiaoxia today to wreak havoc, their calculations were going to fall through. Thinking about this, Shen Qiao asked, Yu Gongzi, as you see it, Hehuan sect came prepared. Do they have more planned? Yu Shenjun laughed. Why do you insist on calling me Yu Gongzi? It's so clunky, even Shikshan would be better. Shen Qiao smiled without speaking. He and Yu Shenjun previously had a conflict over the slaughter of the Yan family, but that was because they represented different interests and viewpoints. There was no great resentment. Never mind that after falling from Banbu Peak, it was this person that walked with him for so long on his back. Regardless, he would not forget the favor. So towards Yu Shenjun, he had none of the caution he had towards Yan Wushi. It was more like an older brother indulging a younger sibling. Yu Shenjun was young, couldn't hold his tongue for long, said, this elaborate setup with hidden intent. Hehuan sect's stance is threatening. It looks like their target is Zhenjiangwen, but really their target is all sects who dare disregard them. Currently the Emperor of Zhou only believes in Buddhism and not Daoism. He supports the Buddhist sects and Hehuan sects struggle amongst themselves. This is a political move, but he has no interest in the Daoist sects, totally neglects them, letting Hehuan sect do as they will. Zhao Qiaying to the side heard an earful. Towards political configurations she had no clear understanding, but hearing Yu Shenjian's insights despite his young age and the reasoning behind them, reminded her of Yan Wushi's usual style. No wonder the student takes after the master. Again she sighed, thinking that Wuxia sect had no successors. Yu Shenjun continued, this time if they can capture Yi Baikan, the others being commonplace and not enough to worry about, they also can conveniently collect all the powers at this Shijiandawai. Probably Switting that bald donkey is jealous just thinking about it, but he still has to consider his face, cannot publicly act in a way that would damage the Buddhist sect's reputation, but Hehuan sect has no qualms about that. If they came today, they came to succeed, with no intention of an indecisive half-retreat. Yuan Xiaoxia to fight Yi Baikan won't be enough, therefore, it's likely Sang Jingxin is already on his way. Yuan Xiao had said, Sang Jingxin was ranked 6th in the Jianghu, and Yi Baikan was somewhere between 3rd or 4th, but this ranking was approximate. Those on the rank list, their Wuzhong level certainly did not wait, and could fluctuate, so although Sang Jingxin was ranked 6th, losing to Yi Baikan wasn't certain. That's not how things were determined. In a fight an instant of breath can harbor 10,000 permutations, a slight deviation and the whole course can change. When grandmasters have an exchange, even the brink of desperation can bring opportunity. The weak triumphing was something that could happen. But Xiao Se and Li Qingyu's match was not going to be that kind of exception. Li Qingyu's performance was steady. After 100 moves, Qia Shui's sword surged. The sword style was like the sky spread with flowers, sword light spilled forth. Xiao Se could no longer defend, although his fan was powerful, it had more of an opening. For observers who had high Wuzhong this opening was obvious, like for Yi Baikan or Zhao Qiaying. How could Li Qingyu not see it? His sword closed like rain, descending from the heavens, backing Xiao Se into a corner, forcing him to pull back and retreat several steps, coming to a stop and admitting defeat. They all say Chen Yangwen's sword skill is exceptional, far exceeding Suan Dus Han. Now that I've seen it, it certainly deserves its reputation. Xiao Se was praising Chen Yangwen and not Li Qingyu. The meaning was that the reason Li Qingyu was strong, was not because of his own ability, but because his sect was strong. He had even dragged Suan Dus Han into it, playing off Shen Qiao and Yi Baikan's potential rivalry. Unfortunately, his cunning was wasted on the wrong person. Li Qingyu wore no expression, and regarded him the same as he would a tree, not a single sign of irritation, his tone even. Your caliber is above average, but you plot too much, and cannot focus on martial training. To advance further will be a hardship for you. Xiao Se, laughing in rage, whether or not I advance, I won't need you to worry on my behalf. Li Qingyu's gaze moved away from him and landed on Yuan Xiaoxiu. After Yuan Xiaoxiu and Yi Baikan had spoken, no one had moved. It was unclear if they were waiting for the outcome between Li Qingyu and Xiao Se. Would Li Qingyu be able to have a match with Yuan Zongju? Yuan Xiaoxiu, a thin smile, we're not on the same level. Li Qingyu, yes or no, we'll have to find out. Yuan Xiaoxiu smiled, didn't say anything, her sleeves were flung out, her qi advancing, overflowing, oppressive. Li Qingyu couldn't defend in time, was forced to pull back. Yuan Xiaoxiu followed closely, not relenting. Chen Yangwen's qinggong was already impressive, but her qinggong was better, her robes floating, sleeves like a cloud, she appeared like a god reincarnate, no sign of any Hehuan sect demonic presence. Li Qingyu had not fought Yuan Xiaoxiu before, like a disciple observing a teacher. Before he thought if her Wuzhong was stronger than Xiao Se, she couldn't be that much stronger, and never mind the rumors of Hehuan sect extracting yin supplementing yang to boost their powers, which was held in broad contempt, and most people didn't want to know more. Now not only Li Qingyu, but everyone else was also shocked and was forced to retract their earlier underestimation. Zhao Qiaying, if Yuan Xiaoxiu can be the head of a sect, she must be strong. Yuan Xiao in the rank list had ranked Yuan Xiaoxiu 9th, Zhao Qiaying wasn't even on the list. Although she didn't say anything, it didn't mean she was satisfied. Now it could be seen that Yuan Xiaoxiu's ranking had reason and evidence. If she were the one fighting Yuan Xiaoxiu, she could hardly fare better than Li Qingyu. In the interim, Yuan Xiaoxiu had used her advantage to force Li Qingyu to the edge of the precipice. Just as the other was about to counterattack, she suddenly retreated, drifting lightly, at least 10 steps out, landed on top of one of Chen Yangwen's flags. The flag waved in the wind, its cloth material was supple, and yet she could stand on top of it, rendering her body weight to nothing. This level of skill, people could only stare in shock. Where previously some people had underestimated her because she was a woman, or were unsatisfied she was in the world's top 10, now knew how wrong they were. I already said, you are no match for this venerable one. Yuan Xiaoxiu said warmly, but what she said was not King Yu definitely cannot compare to Yuan Zongju, Zongju please excuse him. The one speaking was Yi Baikan, let this poor one learn from you instead. If there hadn't been the match between Li Qingyu and Yuan Xiaoxiu, everyone would not have such expectations of the match between Yuan Xiaoxiu and Yi Baikan. Seeing how strong Yuan Xiaoxiu was, now everyone held their breath in anticipation. Who knew that just as Yi Baikan finished speaking, more people arrived on the mountain. At the front was a man, behind him were several young women, among them was Bai Rong, who was very well acquainted with Shen Qiao. As for the man, Shen Qiao was no stranger, he had fought him on the outskirts of Chang'an, with the outcome being one seriously injured, the other with his Wuzhong lost. He recognized the other must also recognize him. As their eyes met, Sang Jingxing revealed a lewd expression, scanned him from head to toe, this gaze also held several parts cruelty and rage. Shen Qiao's features were excellent, on this there was no doubt, he looked as gentle as the spring wind, but people who had interacted with him knew that in his bones was an unbendable willfulness and pride. Sang Jingxing had crossed paths with Shen Qiao, how could he not know? He had thought him to be a harmless, soft creature, he hadn't expected to gnaw down on a piece of hard bone, and swallow a mouthful of sand. However, this aroused Sang Jingxing's desires to conquer and to abuse. So far he had not sought out Shen Qiao, one reason was the other's whereabouts were uncertain, the second was that he heard his Wuzhong had increased significantly, even killing Hehuan sect elders. Although Sang Jingxing was quite invested in this beauty, he had no interest in losing his life for it. After this long parting, Sang Jingxing recognized in one glance Shen Qiao in the crowd, felt even more that the other shone like clear waters, with a celestial form, an icy stance, not counting robes or accessories, there was still the impression of existing outside the mortal realm. It made people want to strip him of his clothes, fool around with him in front of a crowd, watch him turn to fury, watch him cry and beg for mercy, it would be so refreshing. As this thought crossed his mind, an inexplicable flame started in his heart. Sang Jingxing's gaze was unsubtle, everyone could see it, except Shen Qiao, like an elderly monk meditating, half-lidded eyes, he looked at him like he was nothing. Yu Shenjun stood up, blocking Shen Qiao from view, joked, the esteemed Hehuan sect elder, like a dog that just caught sight of a piece of meat, how shameful. Defending Shen Qiao was secondary, Huanyu sect and Hehuan sect didn't get along, the latter had used the opportunity of Yan Wushi leaving the capital and subsequent difficulties to leave Qi and capitulate to Yuan Yun, with the emperor backing them, took Huanyu sect's holdings as their own. Yu Shenjun had a long list of grievances against Hehuan sect, if he hadn't spoken up that would have been more unusual. Sang Jingxing laughed coldly, even your Shifu Yan Wushi doesn't dare talk to me that way. His words were carried by inner qi, akin to the Buddhist steel lion howl, but stronger, dug itself into the ears of everyone present, no exceptions, everyone felt pain in their ears, especially Yu Shenjun. As he had spoken he had prepared against a sudden retaliation by Sang Jingxing, but he didn't realize he had underestimated the other, since Sang Jingxing had targeted him, the strength of the sound he heard was several times that of the people around him, right away his expression changed. His heart beating erratically, about to spit out blood. Luckily someone stretched out a hand, supported him, a burst of qi was passed to him, and helped Yu Shenjun feel better immediately. Threatening a Wanbei, Sang Zhanglao must feel very proud of himself. Shen Qiao said blandly. His words were also carried by inner qi, but was not wild like Sang Jingxing's, bound into a stream, it headed directly at Sang Jingxing. Sang Jingxing raised his sleeves, neutralizing most of the other's attack, the little part that remained, he counted on his deep inner qi, and met it head on. In one moment, the two had had an exchange without moving. But to say who had the upper hand, could not yet be determined by this half move. Sang Jingxin felt that Shen Qiao's Wuzhong had improved. Shen Qiao also felt that there was a reason that Sang Jingxin was included in the ranks of the Grand Masters by Yuan Zixiao. As they looked at each other, Sang Jingxin suddenly laughed. After Shen Daozang's eyes have recovered, they have more focus, even more suited to people's inclinations. No wonder they say the eyes are the doorway to the soul. No matter how beautiful a beauty is, they still require a pair of fine eyes. After his arrival on the mountain, his attention had been completely on Shen Qiao. Yuan Zixiao was irritated, thought to herself that he was ruining the plan, smiled and said, since in the words of Xiao Gongzu, Sang Zhanglao is rank 6th, and I am merely 9th, then to have me this 9th-ranked person fight Yi Guanzu, might disgrace Yi Guanzu. Only then did Sang Jingxin move his gaze from Shen Qiao to Yi Baikan. If I am rank 6th, then what is Yi Guanzu's ranking? He was asking Yuan Zixiao. Yuan Zixiao, Li Yulagong Yuan Xiao Gongzu said, Yi Guanzu's Wuzhong is between 3rd and 4th, not yet determined. Sang Jingxin sneered, if so, in case I win against Yi Guanzu, then this 3rd in the world ranking will have been won by me. Yuan Zixiao laughed, today is Shijiandawai, Hehuan sect should go by Jianghu rules, 1 against 1, lest people talk, say that Hehuan sect abuses their numbers and might direct havoc. Since Sang Zhanglao wants to learn from Yi Guanzu, does Yi Guanzu agree? Yi Baikan knew that Hehuan sect had prepared well in advance for today, were unlikely to relent halfway. To him, Sang Jingxin or Yuan Zixiao there was not much of a difference. Regardless, he'd have to make sure Hehuan sect knew difficulty to force their retreat. If he couldn't mercilessly strike some fear into these people, never mind winning people's allegiance, everyone from the other sects will be gravely disappointed in Xinjiang. Although Sang Jingxing's reputation for lust and cruelty preceded him, it didn't take away from the truth that he was a top-tier martial artist. If people underestimated him, they would surely suffer. Yi Baikan with sword in hand, smiled, Shijiandawai, since it's open to anyone, Hehuan sect would not be excluded. I've long heard of Diao Long Palm style, today this poor one will learn from you. Sang Jingxin was arrogant, but didn't dare underestimate the head of Xinjiang. I am willing, after Yi Guanzu. Before Yuan Zixiao had declared the Wulin rankings, Yi Baikan had already been considered someone in the top 3, although Yuan Zixiao had said somewhere between 3 and 4, in everyone else's eyes, Yi Baikan's identity and power was not affected by the ranking. If he were to fight, it would for certain be a huge match that moved heaven and earth. Sang Jingxin was known for Diao Long Palm style, but it didn't mean he didn't know how to use a sword. This moment he thrust his hand back, and by wrong with both hands held out a long sword. Its shape was old-fashioned. Sang Jingxin didn't take it, instead he pulled out the sword directly. The body of the sword refracted light and fog. One look and you could tell it was a good sword. He flicked the sword downward, Genki spiraling through the sword towards the ground. Dust and dirt flew, rocks levitated, Genki pulling everything inwards. Like a huge wave it surged towards Yi Baikan. Sang Jingxin followed it, flying, human and sword shadow appearing as one, leaving people mesmerized, sighing as they watched. Where previously people assumed Yi Baikan's victory was inevitable, now they weren't so sure. Everyone had their eyes wide open watching the match, afraid that they'd miss even a single detail. Shen Qiao was concentrating on the match, didn't expect Yuan Zixiao to walk towards him, smiling. The last time I crossed paths with Shen Daozang was months ago. I heard Daozang's Wuzhong has improved a lot. Don't know if Zixiao will have the fortune of learning from you. Jianghu rules, usually if someone challenges you directly you cannot refuse, because to refuse would mean you fear the match. Even if the one being challenged had no qualms about their reputation, they would probably be laughed at later, and according to Yuan Xiao's ranking, Shen Qiao was listed before Yuan Xiu, even more reason he could not refuse the other's challenge, otherwise wouldn't it suggest that there was no truth behind the matter? Before Shen Qiao could reply, Yu Shenjun had already stood up. No need for Shen Daozang to fight, I am willing to have a match with Yuan Zongju. Any other time, he would be watching happily from the sidelines. People from the demonic sects were hardly invested outside themselves. Even if Yu Shenjun and Shen Qiao had a close relationship, he wouldn't stand in front of Shen Qiao every time he encountered a problem. But before he came, Yan Wushi had stated that he must block some inconveniences for Shen Qiao. Yu Shenjun didn't know what this meant, could only carry it out rigorously. Why would Yuan Xiu pay him any attention? If your Shizun was personally here, I would have to give him some ground. The meaning to her words, just you, go cool off in the corner. Of course Yu Shenjun understood, he just wanted Yuan Xiu to retreat knowing the challenge, so brought up Yan Wushi's name. Shizun is not far, he will be arriving shortly. Yuan Xiu laughed abruptly. Did Shen Daozang sell his body to Yan Wushi, that even to fight he has to get his agreement? If he's not here, does Shen Daozang not dare have a fight? Shen Qiao gently shook his head. Since Yuan Zongju insists, this poor one will accompany you. He didn't fall for Yuan Xiu's provocations. Although Hehuan sect had power through their sheer numbers, not all of them were at the level of grandmasters. In the end things were held up by Yuan Xiu and Sang Jingxing. Sang Jingxing was fighting Yi Baikan, the outcome was undecided, and Yuan Xiu in no uncertain terms surpassed Li Qingyu, so out of everyone present, except Shen Qiao, no one else was a match for Yuan Xiu. If Shen Qiao didn't fight today, then undoubtedly he was going to watch Hehuan sect destroy Shijiandawai. If things didn't go well on Yi Baikan's end, then from now on, there will be even more people in Jianghu terrified of standing against Hehuan sect. Shen Daozang is a straightforward person. Yuan Xiu smiled, accompanying these gentle words, her body leapt up, two beams of black light shot from her sleeves, flew towards Shen Qiao, so fast that no one had time to react. People with good observation skills could perhaps delineate that those two beams of black light were two black long swords. People with less observation skills couldn't tell anything, might have thought it was some kind of powerful hidden weapon. In a blink of an eye, the swords had appeared in front of Shen Qiao, only an inch of distance between them and his eyelids. The others' movements were too fast. Fan Yuanbei and Zhou Yexu had already started yelling. It looked like Yuan Xiu had been holding back when she fought Li Qingyu, but now she was using her full strength. As they watched from afar, could not react fast enough, they couldn't imagine how Shen Qiao was going to fare. Shen Qiao didn't pull out his sword, his sleeves flew out, his genki burst out, surging towards those black swords. The black swords had appeared out of nowhere, and now met a huge resistance. Their trajectory halted, they paused in the air. In this instant, Shen Qiao pulled out the long sword from behind him, and cut towards the sky. The sword shone like bursts of flowers, blooming forth. Its exquisite beauty also held a ruthless edge, impossible to not look at, impossible to meet head-on. The black swords encountered a burst of sword chi, flew backwards out of control. Yuan Xiu laughed, grabbed the dual swords, and attacked Shen Qiao directly. The two of them fought in a way that was unlike Yi Baikan and Sang Jingxing. The latter were using their chi to put pressure on each other. It was not solely a sword fight, but a competition to see whose chi was deeper and more powerful. But Shen Qiao and Yuan Xiu were both very strong swordsmen. As they fought, there was also an exchange of inner chi. but it was more secondary to sword chi and sword style. Every part was integral, but the fight was more pleasing to the eye than Yi and Sang's match. So as the crowd wandered between the two matches, more was looking into Shen Qiao's match. Fighting was not dancing, could not be restricted to one area. This kind of fight was also more than just an exchange. Although they hadn't put their lives on the line, they still were putting it all out there. Shen Qiao in the way of the sword had entered the realm of sword soul. Never mind Yuan Xiaoxiu, there were scant few in the world who could compare, but Yuan Xiaoxiu was also not a energy-conserving lamp. When she didn't hold back, Shen Qiao similarly wouldn't be able to defeat her in a 2-3 moves. If that were the case, then Yuan Xiaoxiu's reputation would be false, or she wasn't trying. So the two of them fought from Zhejiangwan's main gates to the roof, from the roof to the stone walls. Both had Qinggong of the highest level. They fought along the stone walls, sword chi interweaving. From afar, they looked like two paper figures stuck to the wall, but in truth their Qinggong had surpassed a certain realm of possibility. The group of youth watched with their mouths hanging open. Even Yu Shenjun couldn't believe his eyes. You have to realize when he picked up Shen Qiao, the other's Wuzhong was almost completely gone, a severely injured blind man. Not that much time had passed, and already he was so strong. This was the true ability of a grandmaster. So Shen Qiao against Yuan Xiaoxiu, even against his own Shifu Yan Wushi, could stand his ground. Yu Shenjun had just now, ignorant of life and death, called him Shidi. The only reason the other hadn't made a fuss was because he was good-tempered. Zhao Qiaying also sighed. It looks like when we had exchanges at Wuxia sect, Shen Daozang was holding back. Shen Qiao was kind and warm, but his sword chi was unusually ruthless. Shen Hetong in his hand resonated. Shone, in the manner of lifting rivers and reversing oceans, rang out in unison with the heavens and earth. Although Yuan Xiaoxiu wielded dual swords and seemed to have the number advantage, as time passed, the other seemed to get even stronger. She realized that to respond required more and more effort. The ruthless sword chi seemed to dominate right above her head, and she felt its pressure. The two of them fought up and down the mountain. The crowd couldn't follow them down the mountain just to watch. Yuan Xiaoxiu, seeing that they no longer had an audience, couldn't help but call out, "Shen Daozang, I have something to say." Since she had called for the other to cease, she also couldn't continue, so leapt backwards. Seeing that Shen Qiao didn't pursue her, breathed a sigh of relief, felt the pressure above her herd also abruptly vanish. Yuan Xiaoxiu smiled. Previously, when I heard Shen Daozang had killed two of our elders, I almost didn't believe it. Now I realize that it was I who had eyes but couldn't recognize Taishan. She appeared calm, but knew that if they continued, she was not Shen Qiao's opponent. Shen Qiao, like a clear mirror, Yuan Zongji purposefully led me down the mountain. Surely it wasn't just to praise my Wuzhong. Yuan Xiaoxiu, another smile. Shen Daozang is a smart person. To be frank, I have an offer to make you. Are you interested? Shen Qiao, please say it. Yuan Xiaoxiu, I know Sang Jingxing and you harbor a deep resentment. This person is cruel and kills indiscriminately, driven by lust. And then there's Chen Gong. He returned favors with revenge, time and time again confronting you. Now he and Sang Jingxing are working together. He even offered up Tai Yi sword, trying to advance politically. In truth, a petty person. I am also irritated by him. Today, if Shen Daozang is willing to leave this place, act as a bystander, and no longer interfere in the affairs of Zhejiangwan, I can offer you Chen Gong, and help you kill Sang Jingxing. How about it? Shen Qiao slowly shook his head. Yuan Xiaoxiu raised her eyebrows. What, isn't it a good deal? Shen Qiao, for me, it is a good deal. Yuan Xiuxiu, then why doesn't Shen Daozang agree? Shen Qiao, Sang Jingxing and Yuan Zongju have a long history. If Yuan Zongju wants to get rid of him, this idea must not be a new one. Why would you need this poor one as a raft? As for Chen Gong, he is indeed petty, but towards him I harbor no great resentment. Even if I wanted to pursue it, I can find him myself, no need to waste Yuan Zongju's efforts. Yuan Zongju laughed coldly, you're so close to Yan Wushi, but aren't willing to work with me. Looks like Shen Daozang fakes his impartiality, and looks down on women. Shen Qiao sighed, Yuan Zongju's words are heavy. When I interact with Yan Zongju, there's a reason behind every matter. It would be hard to sum up in a few words, but I have no intention of looking down on Yuan Zongju. This day and age favors men and slights women. Even if there were less restrictions in the Jianghu, for women to stand alone it is 100 times harder than a man. This is one reason why Hehuan sect has been targeted again and again, but Yuan Zongju has enabled Hehuan sect to not fall in the face of adversity. This is due to Yuan Zongju's skills. Compared to you, this poor one was also previously a sect leader, but fared much worse. Yuan Xiuxiu was a little surprised. She hadn't expected Shen Qiao to speak in her favor. Ever since she entered the Jianghu, everyone called her demon woman, etc. After her Wuzhong improved, people no longer dared saying it to her face, but behind her back they never stopped. Hehuan sect killed people unscrupulously, did things mercilessly, but ask anyone in the Jianghu, who hadn't killed before. Out of the 3 demonic sects, it was not only Hehuan sect that was merciless. It could be said, their reputation was so bad, largely because they used extract yin supplement yang duel cultivation, leaving people with a lewd impression. Her beautiful eyes shone, her expression softening a little. Shen Daozang's words, truly moves me. It's rare to hear someone speaking on Hehuan sect's behalf, when by wrong again and again showed you mercy. I thought she was just young and easy to trick. Now, I see that her judgment is not bad. Shen Qiao smiled, I'm not speaking on Yuan Zongju's behalf, I'm just saying what is fair. To be frank, I do not like how your sect works. Sang Jingxing, Huo Zijing, if they died there would be a reason. They don't deserve any sympathy. Our paths are different so we cannot work together. Today you have every intention of stopping Shijiandawai. I cannot act as you wish. We stand on different grounds, soldier and thief. What will happen will happen. Yuan Xiuxiu didn't show her age. By looks alone she might be in her 20s. Her smile was very charming. Shen Daozang is so understanding, even I can't resist. Are you willing to enter my close circle? If you don't like Hehuan sect, you won't have to interact with anyone from my sect. I have several estates elsewhere. If Shen Daozang is willing, I promise you that the relationship between us, no one will know. The two of them, how had they switched from fighting to discussing physical relations? Shen Qiao didn't understand, but he was a kind person, could not use harsh words like Yan Wushi to push the other person away. He folded his hands, I thank you Yuan Zongju for your favor. Saying this he turned to leave. Yuan Xiuxiu smiled, in a flash she blocked his path. Shen Daozang, why are you in a rush to leave? We were just talking. Looking at you, surely you haven't been pulled by Yan Wushi into his curtains. As I see it that doesn't seem to interest him, or do you like Bai Rong more? I think that little girl likes you a lot, maybe I can help you too. Shen Qiao felt Yuan Xiuxiu's attitude was a little odd. He realized something, said, you're dragging things out, to purposefully keep me here. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.